Alrighty, good morning, dear friends, and welcome to the main object big book study of Alcoholics Anonymous. I am an alcoholic. My name is David. Complete, total blessing to be here with all of you. And why don't we start off the meeting this morning with a reading of the AA preamble, and our friend Dave R. is going to read that for us.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dave, and I am an alcoholic. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of people who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any kind of controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Dave, thank you so much. And now I'm going to ask everybody to join me in inviting God into this meeting and into our hearts with the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. All right, here we are. I think everybody is a veteran at this point, but just as a reminder, we are a line by line big book study, and we go very slowly through the book. And especially today, what we're going to see is that the purpose in going this slowly is really not just to it's beyond just gaining the knowledge that's on the written pages. It's about transforming our relationship to this book so that we are, each one of us, whether you're 30 years sober or 30 days sober, so that you have the ability to use this book as an all-purpose tool to share the power and the message of Alcoholics Anonymous with another person, hopefully a newly sober or a suffering alcoholic. And so we find by going through the book slowly, it really unlocks that. And one of the things that we do is, as I mentioned many times, is that we break it down. We categorize the text into 5 categories. You can see them there. They're also in the chat. Questions, directions and explanations, promises, warnings, and history. The colors, of course, are the highlighters that I use. And so what that does is it really allows me to turn the book into a tool for use, not a sort of a museum piece that I keep up on the shelf. And as I said, that stuff is in. I see that Rich was so kind as to post it in the chat. This morning, it is week 45. We are on page 45. And so I'm going to summarize where we are. We last week we ended with the second full paragraph, or at least the first sentence there, where we talk about the purpose of the big book. We're going to, just like on the Roadrunner cartoons, in order to get a start, we're going to wind back a moment and pull back and just go over the paragraph before, just to get some context, and then move ahead. We are probably only going to get about 1 page done this morning, because it's just, there's so much going on here, and I really want to be able to open it up for discussion. So, and the format is I will do my thing until about 7 o'clock, and then we will open it up for questions and reflections and so forth. And then also, as you probably know, the meeting is being recorded, audio only, and will be posted on our YouTube website. And as the art, that's where, excuse me, our so sorry. That is where you'll find our archives of most all of our meetings, and only my part is recorded because in case there's a new person or someone who's uncomfortable with being recorded, we don't want to do that. So, anyway, just to summarize, in last week's reading, Bill opened chapter 4 by reaffirming a pretty uncomfortable truth, and that is, as alcoholics, we are thoroughly incapable of freeing ourselves from alcohol through our own will and mental capacities. And he makes the point that freedom can only be found through reliance upon a higher power. Now, in today's reading, Bill begins, we'll see, by assuring the reader that, as daunting as the task may seem of acquiring a higher power, the main purpose of the book is to make the attainment of a higher power possible. And the way that he phrases that is so important. He doesn't say the book will give you a higher power. It says it will enable us to find one. But we'll get more into that in a moment. But what Bill often does, he does here, as he often does, is he then balances reassurance with the delivery of some hard truths. And in this instance, he lets us know that the only way we can establish a relationship with this higher power is by adopting a new set of spiritual and moral principles. And then, true to form, Bill, so he lays out that hard truth, and then he quickly assures the reader that many now sober alcoholics initially struggled with the notion of the spiritual and moral aspects of the program. However, once these people saw the results they were getting, they became willing to lay aside prejudice and examine the matter with an open mind. The results that, as Bill goes on to write, they were fruitful, as many alcoholics, once atheists or agnostic, were eventually able to develop an initial idea of a higher power based on their own ideals of what such a being would be. So with that, why don't we jump in, and as I said, we're going to back up just a bit. So we're on the first full paragraph on page 45 of our text, and the first sentence there, lack of power, that was our dilemma. That is a warning. Not only is it a warning, I think it's a diagnosis, and I think it's one of the most important lines that we will read, or that I've encountered in the first 164, or in the book in general. I mean, it's almost like you want to have a gold star next to that sentence, because what I have found is that whether I'm 30 days sober, a year sober, or 30 years sober, most of my problems go back to that, can be diagnosed with that sentence. Because as an alcoholic, I am almost, I don't know if I'm genetically wired, but I am mentally wired to be a self-powered individual. And but as we just read here, it's not enough power. It's not the right kind of power, and it's my dilemma. So, in the next sentence, next two sentences, I have in green for explanations. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a, in italics, power greater than ourselves, obviously. And why is that in italics? It's almost like Bill is wanting to shake us and say, this like self-power thing, yo, we know it feels comfortable. It doesn't work, obviously. And then we end out the paragraph with a question, which is in orange. The oft neglected orange highlighter comes into use here. So, but where and how will we define this power? And then moving ahead, the first two sentences here, you could categorize them a number of things as directions or an explanation. I put them as a reward. It's not a reward necessarily of working the program, but it's a great, it is a powerful bonus. And that is, or a gift from God, we could say. Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. We could spend a whole hour on that sentence. As a matter of fact, you may recognize the title of our meeting in that sentence, because that's the whole focus here. The whole focus is unlocking the book to find a power greater than yourself. To enable you to find a power greater than yourself that will solve your problem. And why that's important is the book does not hand us a higher power. What the book does is really, if you wanted to get technical about it, if we follow what it says, it unlocks or unblocks our natural barriers to experiencing or finding a higher power. So that once we follow what this book tells us to do, and we follow it in the way the book tells us to follow it, we become free of the natural impediments we create, the natural roadblocks we put up between ourselves and God. So that there's an underlying assumption is that we don't have to, that as human beings, we don't have to, it's not hard for us to find God. We don't have to work, it's not a difficult task for us to find God. However, the difficult task is unloading the blockages we create between us and God. The difference is, and maybe seem like I'm splitting hairs, but the difference is critical, because we come to AA and the tendency is to want to acquire things. And I don't mean physical things. I mean like, I have to learn more. I don't know enough to share this message. I have to learn more to get sober. I have to get it. And what this book tells us is au contraire. It's not about getting it. It's not about acquiring knowledge. It's not about acquiring insight. It's actually about losing things. We need to lose our character defects. We need to lose our self-reliance, because once we become free of those things, and I think those of us who have been through the process will attest, once we become free of those things, our higher power comes rushing in like a tidal wave. And I don't know if anybody else has experienced that, but I myself have. And so it will enable us to find a power greater than ourselves, which will solve our problem. Just to be clear, what's our problem? If we go 6 lines further up, it tells us what our problem is. Lack of power. That's our problem. We may want to say, well, drinking alcohol is my problem. Well, first of all, obviously none of us are here because drinking was working so well for us. I get that. But the book also tells us that our drinking problem was but a symptom. And what is it a symptom of? Lack of power. I hope that makes sense. So moving on. The next 2 sentences I have in green for explanations, and so that reads, that means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, we are going to talk about God. I think it's important to really look at what those sentences are saying. And because it's saying that our problem is lack of power. This book solves that problem for us. And okay, I'm convinced that lack of power is my problem. Wow, this book is going to solve it for us. I'm all in. And then he says, and this is important, that means we have written a book which we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. We may not think of what that means, but I think it's important to see to understand what Bill is saying here. Because what he's saying to the new alcoholic is, he's saying what we are going to do in this book is we are going to instruct you, because this is a textbook, remember. We are going to instruct you on what to believe and what to act and how to act. And remember, our literature refers to us as children of chaos who are self-will run riot. And the book is saying to ourselves, if you want to get sober, there are certain things you're going to need to believe, and there are certain ways you are going to need to conduct yourself. And the belief, that's the spiritual aspect. The conduct is the moral aspect. I hope that makes sense. And why I think that's important, and this is critical, is that if you went to, this is obviously not a scientific number, but if you went to 100 different AA meetings, 100 different AA groups, my guess is in 90 or more of those 100, you may hear about the benefits of a higher power in this way of life, but you will not hear about the costs or demands. And why is that important? It's important because we tell everybody how great it is to have a higher power and how wonderful this way of life is. But we never tell them what they're going to have to confront within themselves to get it. What they're going to have to let go of. And as a result, many people keep on drinking because they're reaching for the benefit, but they're also locked in to their own blockages because no one said to them, oh, by the way, you're going to need to alter what you believe and the way you act. I hope that makes sense because it's critical. And it's critical that we make that part of our message to people. So, and then it goes on to say, and this is a warning, here difficulty arises with agnostics. So we just said we're going to be telling you about things that are spiritual and moral, and we're going to talk about God. Bill is aware that many people reading this book or many people being told about this book at that point are going to, Bill is aware that many people are going to go, whoa. You know, it's almost like I have a dear, beloved friend who is a bit familiar with selling a car. And it is, you know, and one of the things that you do, I'm acting like I know anything about selling a car. If anybody on the meeting wants to correct me, please do. But I think what you do when you sell a car is you may want to feature the benefits first. The cool things about the car. Look at the color. Look at the spoiler. Hear that sound system. And you know that part, if anybody's bought a car, where they get you all like excited about the car, and then they sit you down in the manager's office? And what do they do in the manager's office? They tell you about what it's going to cost and how much you're going to have to pay month after month. But if a car salesman is good, and we may have a good car salesman on the line here, they've gotten you so excited about the car itself that you're willing to do whatever it takes. So that's the same principle at play here. But people take a step back. And this next part after that is direction. Many times, or explanation rather, many times we talk to a new man and watch his hope rise as we discuss his alcoholic problems and explain our fellowship. And then the rest of this paragraph I have in pink is a warning. But his face falls when we speak of spiritual matters, especially when we mention God, for we have reopened a subject which our man thought he had neatly evaded or entirely ignored. So I'm not saying that everybody that you approach or every newcomer should necessarily balk when you talk about these aspects of our program. However, what I do want to affirm is that if they do balk, if they do become less enthusiastic, it's not because you explained the program incorrectly. It's because you explained it the right way. Does that make sense? Because remember a couple weeks ago we talked about a word that they use 5 times in the first 164 pages? Drastic. Drastic. Imagine if you had to have surgery and the surgeon told you this is going to be a drastic operation. You would swallow hard, right? And again, that's part of what I think has been lost in our current AA culture. So, we know how he feels. As an author, as a storyteller, I think Bill is so masterful, because what he continually does is he presents hard facts and then he presents empathy and understanding. Like, hey, if you're having a hard time with this, we get it, because we've been there. Remember, it was many weeks ago, but remember when we talked about Bill's story, and Ebby first starts talking about God. And Bill says, let him rant. My gin's going to last longer. and then the rest, hold on, yes. Well, not the rest of this page is pink for warning. We have shared his honest doubt and prejudice. Remember, what's the title of the chapter? We agnostics. What does that mean? What Bill is trying to convey is that we have all been there. It's not, the title of the chapter is not you agnostics, you people with the problem, you people with doubt. So while I firmly believe we have to present the hard facts, what we have to also present is our own journey and our own reaction to those same hard facts. Now, I want to also reference our, because I relied on it several times this week, is our the 1939 dictionary, because I went to that and I looked up the word. First of all, I looked up the word agnostic, and that is one who neither affirms or denies the existence of a personal deity. An agnostic is someone who either is avoiding a decision or, for whatever reason, maybe made a decision about God and then, for whatever reason, has reneged on that decision, like started to believe different things. And I'm saying that because I think it is possible, because it's exactly what happened to me, is to be very firm in a higher power and then lose it over time to the point where we become self-powered, or we think self-powered. But that's a story for another day. The other term I want to define is prejudice, because you hear a lot of different definitions of prejudice. And one of the, and I went to the book, the dictionary for this, and this definition, which you'll see in the chat, is right out of the 1939 dictionary. Prejudice is prejudgment without due examination. Some of you may be thinking, and rightly so, oh, that's kind of like contempt prior to investigation. And that's exactly what prejudice is. Some of us have been violently anti-religious. To others, the word God brought up a particular idea of Him with which someone had tried to impress them during childhood. Perhaps we rejected this particular conception because it seemed inadequate. With that rejection, we imagined we had abandoned the God idea entirely. I think that's interesting, the way, I just realized something, the way he said it. We imagined we abandoned the God idea entirely. And I think Bill uses that. Why doesn't he just say we abandoned the idea entirely? He doesn't. He says we imagined we abandoned it. And why is that important? I think it's important because he later says in the text, deep down in every man, woman, and child is the belief in a higher power. So what I'm saying, I think I'm going to go out on a limb and say what Bill is trying to let us know is you may think you rejected God, but there's part of you that is always going to remain linked to that higher power, bonded to that higher power. We were bothered with the thought that faith and dependence upon a power beyond ourselves was somewhat weak, even cowardly. We looked upon this world of warring individuals, warring theological systems, and inexplicable calamity with deep skepticism. We looked askance, and askance means sideways. We looked askance at many individuals who claimed to be godly. And what that means is that we looked with skepticism or even judgment. So, what Bill is saying here is that we agree there are a lot of reasons to have reservations about a spiritual way of life. No argument. But what does he go on to say? Let's look and let's close out the chapter, and I think we will end. Will we end there? I think we're going to end there. How could a supreme being have anything to do with it all? And that's a question. Again, we're in orange. And who could comprehend a supreme being anyhow? Again, in orange. And then we have a promise. Yet in other moments we found ourselves thinking, when enchanted by a starlit night, who then made all this? We experience awe. And then a warning. There was a feeling of awe and wonder, but it was fleeting and soon lost. And why, I wouldn't say it's a warning about, oh, we're going to drink, but it's an acknowledgement that we are not going to find a permanent answer to the question of who or what is God. It is something we answer for ourselves on a moment-to-moment basis. And I will say it doesn't matter whether you're newly sober or you're sober many years. That's exactly my experience. One of the things, and I'm going to, because we've gone long enough and I've gone over, so I don't want to go further in the text today, but I just want to mention, because what he talks about in the paragraphs that we'll touch on next week is the laying aside of prejudice when it comes to a higher power. And I think that's critical in our discussion today, and of course we'll follow it up next week. And that is, so what we're doing is we are laying aside judgment or conclusions until we can undertake a thorough, open-minded investigation. And how do we do that investigation? We do it through following what the book says. We do it through the steps, because the 12 steps, particularly the inventory and the amends steps, are really, when it comes down to it, a form of investigation, because we are removing the blockages between us and God so that we can have a personal experience of that higher power. And what I will say to you is, Bill is, again, asserting that we should lay aside all of our prejudice. And sometimes if I listen in AA meetings, I sometimes hear ideas that indicate to me that hasn't, it's happened kind of in a halfway manner. And what I mean by that is I will hear things like AA is spiritual and not religious. Now, I'm not going to argue the fact that I'm not trying to lead you to believe AA is religious. It is not. However, the problem with that statement is that it makes an assumption. And the assumption it makes is AA is spiritual, which is a good thing. It's not religious, a bad thing. And see, it makes that assumption about spirituality and religion. Whereas if I've fully laid aside prejudice, at best, I should have no opinion about which is good or which is bad because I haven't thoroughly investigated. And you'll even hear it, and I'll close with this. In when you hear people say about like I'm a recovering Catholic and all of that stuff, it's like what Bill is saying to us is let it all go and do the investigation. And so there we have it. I'm going to open it up now. You've heard enough of me. And what I'd like to do is hear some from you. And also, if you look in the chat, we have 3 questions for reflection. So check those out if you're not sure what you'd like to share today. But I'd really like to hear from you.